The wind came down from the north that evening, thin and sharp as a blade. It carved its way through the brittle grass and whistled against the warped wood of Silas Granger's barn. The horses were restless. Boone, his gray gelding, pawed at the dirt, uneasy with the approaching dusk. Silas stepped out from his cabin, his coat tugged close, eyes narrowing against the dust curling in the air like smoke. He'd known storms like this, dry ones that left your mouth tasting of ash, as if the land itself were smoldering. They always brought something with them. Sometimes just bad luck. Sometimes worse. The barn door creaked against its latch. Silas reached for it, intending to check the hinges before the wind got bolder, but stopped when he saw the shape in the shadow. Small, still, curled against the back corner of the barn like a wounded animal, half buried in straw. He stepped closer, cautious but not afraid. He'd faced things that made fear seem like a luxury. War, famine, the kind of men who'd kill you for your boots and a half-smoked cigar. This girl didn't look like any of those. She was wrapped in what looked like a flour sack torn into strips, hair tangled, face streaked with dirt and dried blood. Her knees were drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight, as if her own bones might betray her. She didn't move when he knelt. Her eyes flickered open, wild glassy, the way a cornered fox might look at a raised rifle. "It's all right," Silas said, voice low and plain. "Ain't gonna hurt you." No response, just a tremor that ran through her shoulders. "You hungry?" The girl blinked once, slow. "I've got stew," he added. "Might be more bone than beef, but it's hot." Still no words, but the way her mouth moved, dry, cracked lips pressing together, told him what he needed to know. He stood, backed off, left the barn door wide. It wasn't long before she followed. Not all the way inside the cabin at first. Just hovered near the door, legs wobbling beneath her like a newborn colt. He didn't press her. Set the bowl on the table, fetched a second blanket from the trunk, and went about his business like she wasn't there. By the time the lantern was lit, she was inside, sitting cross-legged on the floor, wolfing down the soup, with both hands gripping the bowl like it might vanish. "Got a name?" he asked. Her spoon paused. Her eyes lifted. For a moment, he thought she might bolt. "Callie," she whispered. Silas nodded. "Well, Callie, you're welcome to rest here tonight. Ain't much, but there's a cot by the stove." She didn't thank him. Didn't need to. The way she clung to the heat of the bowl, to the scent of real food, and the simple silence of a safe room, it was all the gratitude he required. Later, when she was curled beneath the blanket, knees still pulled tight, Silas sat by the window and rolled himself a cigarette. He didn't light it, just let it dangle between his fingers, a habit of thought more than craving. It had been 6 years since anyone but Boone shared this cabin. 6 years since Martha passed, quiet and pale beneath the old quilt sheet sewn, when they were young. He remembered the sound of her breath slowing, the silence that followed, and how it rang louder than any gunshot. Silas didn't take in strays. Not anymore. He'd given enough of himself to the world, fought in a war that left his left leg full of metal and his right eye a little dim. He'd buried friends and enemies alike. He wanted only peace now, and the quiet of the range. But the girl had been so still, so alone. He leaned back in his chair and listened to the wind whistle outside, softer now, as if the storm had passed them by. She stirred in her sleep once, a sharp gasp, then a name mumbled into the dark. He couldn't make it out. He didn't ask. Boone neighed once in the barn, the kind of sound that made a man pay attention. Silas eased up, reached for the rifle above the door, and stepped out into the cold. Nothing. Just moonlight across the hills. Just dust rising and falling in little spirals, like ghost dancers. When he returned, Callie was awake, sitting upright, blanket bunched in her lap. "Thought I heard something," she said. "Just Boone being Boone," he replied. She nodded but didn't lie back down. "Folks after you?" Her eyes darkened. "Maybe. You steal something?" A pause. "No, not really." Silas didn't press. He set the rifle beside the door and stirred the fire until it cracked and popped again. "I don't need to know," he said. "Not unless you want me to." She was silent for a while. Then, softer than before, "They'll come. If they think I'm still breathing." Silas met her gaze. Behind the dirt and the fear was something else. Not weakness, something steel-bound, hidden like a knife beneath a sleeve. "Then it's a good thing I've got a gun," he said. The corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Silas looked into the flames. "Maybe I'm tired of letting things die alone." That night, as the fire dwindled to embers, Callie finally lay down again. Her breathing slowed. Outside, the wind was quiet. The hills stretched wide and dark, holding their secrets in silence. And inside the cabin, two strangers shared the warmth of firelight, neither knowing that come morning, the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The wind picked up again the next morning, dry and low like something whispering through the ribs of the land. The sky had turned a flat, hard gray, the kind that spoke of dust storms waiting just over the ridge. Silas knew the signs. He'd seen more storms than he could count, and most of them started just like this, slow, with a quiet that pressed against your ears. Callie was already up when he stepped outside. She stood near the barn, hair whipping around her face, a pitchfork in her hands. She looked like she'd slept maybe an hour, but there was purpose in the way she moved. Not someone playing at work, someone used to it. "You don't need to do chores," he called out. She didn't look at him. "I know." Boone watched them both with mild interest as Silas joined her. The horses were fed, the feed bags tied off neat and clean. She was good with her hands, quick but careful. "You ever work a ranch before?" he asked. She shrugged. "Bits and pieces." "That's so. Doesn't mean I want to stay," she said, glancing at him. "Just figure I ought to earn the soup." Silas chuckled under his breath. "Fair enough." They worked in silence a while longer, until the first low howl of the storm started down in the canyon. Silas felt it in his chest, the way a man with a limp feels thunder in his joints. He motioned toward the cabin. "Best to button up tight. Storm's coming down hard." Inside, the wind began to rattle the windows. Silas laid a wet cloth along the sill and stuffed rags into the cracks. Callie crouched by the fire, feeding kindling in with careful hands. "You ever see one before?" he asked. "A storm?" He nodded. She gave a faint smirk. "A few. Been caught in one, too. Thought the sky was falling in." Silas poured 2 tin cups of black coffee. She took hers with both hands, warming her fingers. It wasn't until the third gust of wind slammed into the walls that she flinched. "You all right?" he asked. Her shoulders tensed. "Just don't like the sound." "You get that way from sleeping rough too long." She didn't reply. Silas sat in his old rocker and sipped a bit of coffee. He watched her as she settled across from him, the fire painting shadows across her cheekbones. There was something else there. Not just fear. Guilt, maybe. Or memory. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You said folks might come looking for you." Callie's eyes narrowed, guarded again. "I did." "What kind of folks?" "The kind who don't ask twice," she said. "Men who ride hard and don't bother with names." Silas tilted his head. "You ran from them." She didn't answer. Instead, she tugged at the collar of the oversized shirt he'd given her the night before, revealing a patch of skin just above her left shoulder blade. There, raw against the pale of her back, was a mark, burned into her flesh. Not ink, not scar. A brand. It was small, but clear. A snake coiled around a spade. Silas's jaw tightened. "I've seen that mark before," he muttered. Callie let the shirt fall back into place. "You know what it means, then." "Rakers," he said. "Goddamn Rakers gang." Callie looked into the fire. "They took me when I was a kid. After they burned my home. I ran once. Got caught. They made sure I'd never forget what I was to them." He stared at her. "You one of them?" "I was a prisoner," she snapped, then softer. "And later, not much more. They taught me things, sure. To shoot. To lie. To vanish. Thought it meant I mattered. I didn't." Silas leaned back, quiet for a long moment. The storm was louder now, a constant moan like the world had cracked its knuckles. "Why'd you run this time?" he asked. Callie's fingers tightened around her cup. "Because they're planning something. Bigger than usual. I heard names, places. People on a list. What kind of list? She hesitated. Kill list. Silas's expression didn't change. You take something from them. I took a book, she said. A ledger. Names. Notes. Their whole plan. Where is it? I buried it before I came here. Didn't think I'd make it out this far. He studied her, seeing not just the girl starving behind his barn, but someone else entirely. Someone who'd crawled through darkness and come out bloody but breathing. You planning on running again? She met his eyes. I don't know. Maybe I just needed to stop for a while. Silas nodded slowly. You're welcome here, as long as you need. The fire snapped, and for a moment, they sat in a silence that was more peace than tension. Then Boone whinnied. Not the idle sound of a bored horse, but a short, sharp burst. Silas stood, grabbed the rifle. What is it? Callie whispered, already on her feet. He opened the door a crack. The storm made it groan on its hinges. A figure stood far out along the ridge, too far to make out the face, but close enough that the silhouette was clear, tall, broad, hat low, still as a monument. Watching. Silas lowered the rifle. Someone's out there, he said. Callie stepped beside him, peered out. Her face went pale. Did they follow me? Looks like they found you. Silas shut the door and slid the bolt across. They won't come in a storm, he said. Callie was still staring at the closed door. They'll wait. That's what they do. He nodded. Then we wait back. And the wind howled louder. The storm broke by morning, but the air stayed heavy with grit, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Silas rose before the sun, stiff-legged and silent, watching the horizon from the porch. The figure on the ridge was gone, but hoofprints marked the edge of the property, deep and deliberate. Not just a passerby, a scout. Inside, Callie stirred, slowed awake. She moved like someone used to sleeping light, every creak of the floorboard under her bare feet another signal to remain guarded. They were here, weren't they? She asked. Silas didn't answer right away. Instead, he loaded 2 shells into his rifle, the soft click echoing in the hush between them. They were watching, he said finally. Whoever it was didn't come close, but they'll be back. Not the type to waste a ride unless they plan to return. Callie's face tightened. Then I have to go. No, Silas said sharp. You leave, they'll catch you in a day. Maybe less. You stay, we make a stand. You don't even know what they are. I know enough, he muttered. You said Rakers. That mark on your back. I've seen it burned into fence posts outside raised homesteads. Hell, I helped track them once. Long time ago. Her eyes widened. You were a lawman? Not exactly, he said. I rode with the federal marshal for a while, before I took up a shovel and a plow instead of a badge. Why'd you stop? Silas looked at the hills. Got tired of burying friends. Callie swallowed hard. Then you understand why I can't let them get that ledger back. He turned to her. If it's as bad as you say, they'll burn half the territory to find it. She nodded. I buried it near Red Hook Creek, 10 miles east. Silas considered the name. Too close for comfort. That afternoon, he rode into town. Dustville was little more than a main street with a jail, a general store, and a saloon that smelled of spilled whiskey and old sweat. The sheriff was a barrel-chested man named Lyle Coker, who'd never seen more than a bar brawl in his tenure. Coker leaned back in his chair when Silas entered. Well, thought you'd sworn off town visits. I need information, Silas said. Always free to ask. Silas leaned on the desk. Heard anything about the Rakers? Coker's face soured like milk turned in the sun. A ranch north of here got hit last week. Simmons family. Place was torched. Same calling card. Spade and snake carved into the door. Anyone survive? Nah, soul. Silas's jaw tensed. They looking for a girl? Coker's eyes narrowed. Something I should know. Silas straightened. You'll know soon enough. Just keep an eye on your hills. He left before the sheriff could press further. On the way out of town, he stopped at the general store, bought fresh shells, a coil of rope, and a second saddlebag. When he returned to the ranch, the sun was low and orange, bleeding into the land like fire. Callie was waiting at the fence, her eyes already on the eastern ridge. "They're close," she said. "I can feel it." "They hit a ranch near here," he replied. "Left no one breathing. Coker's scared. They want the book." Silas nodded. "Then we let them come." That night, Callie showed him the map she'd etched with a stick on a piece of rawhide. Red Hook Creek curved like a sickle through a low valley, flanked by mesquite and shale. She'd buried the ledger in a hollow beneath a dead cottonwood tree. "We go at dawn," she said. But dawn came with more than sunlight. A low thunder rolled across the plain, not weather, but hooves. Many of them. Silas stepped outside, rifle in hand. Dust curled on the horizon. Riders, a dozen at least, fanned across the basin like black ants. Callie stood beside him. "That's them." "You sure?" "I know the way they ride." Silas turned to her, measuring something in her face. "You ready to fight?" She looked at him, steady. "I've been fighting since I was 12. They spent the next hour boarding up windows, reinforcing the barn, and laying a tripwire snare at the southern fence. Silas handed Callie a revolver with a smooth iron grip. "You any good?" he asked. She checked the chamber, without flinching. "Better than I look." Boone neighed in the barn. The sky darkened as the riders drew near. Silas and Callie took cover behind the wagon, eyes fixed on the crest of the hill. Then they appeared. 12 riders in black dusters, some masked, others showing twisted grins. At their center rode a man taller than the rest, broad-shouldered. His hat slanted to shade eyes that gleamed like polished flint. Callie sucked in a breath. Silas glanced sideways. "You know him." Her voice dropped. "That's Boone Raker, the leader." Her face went pale. "My brother." The riders halted just out of range. Boone Raker dismounted, arms wide as if greeting old friends. "Callie," he called, "I knew you'd come crawling to a fence post like this. Always like to play house." Silas gritted his teeth. "You hand over the ledger," Boone said, "and we let the old man live." Callie's hand curled around her revolver. "I burned it," she shouted. Boone laughed. "Now I know you didn't." Silas stepped forward. "You come any closer, you'll regret it." Boone raised a hand, and half the riders moved left, flanking. Silas backed toward the barn. "They're not going to wait," he muttered. "It starts tonight." Callie looked at him. "Then we end it tonight." Inside the barn, the firelight glinted off barrels and bolts. Silas handed her a box of shells. "Load up," he said. The trap was set. The dust began to rise, and the Rakers were coming. The first shot cracked through the dusk like a snapped bone. Silas didn't flinch. He was crouched behind the overturned wagon, rifle braced on the wheel well, eyes tracing the dust cloud curling where the bullet struck. Boone's riders had fanned out, smart enough not to charge in a straight line, but not smart enough to think Silas Coyle hadn't planned for that. Callie lay flat across the barn loft, a revolver in each hand. She moved like a snake through the shadows, waiting for the next glint of iron or flick of movement in the mesquite. "Left flank," Silas called. 2 shapes burst forward on horseback, using the low brush as cover. Callie took the first, with a clean shot to the chest. The second veered, panicked, and caught a round from Silas's Winchester. The horse kept running. The man did not. They didn't speak between shots. The language was in movement, in trust, in knowing the other would cover what you couldn't see. Boone Raker rode up the center, untouched. He wasn't hiding. That wasn't his way. His coat flared like the wings of a vulture, and in his hand he carried a long-barreled revolver etched with silver. Callie froze when she saw it. "He still has Pa's gun," she said under her breath. Silas didn't turn. "You all right?" "Yeah." "You sure?" I said yeah. They waited. Boone stopped about 30 paces out, raising a hand to still the others. His voice rang clear and cruel across the battlefield. "You shoot well, sister. Like you were raised right." Callie leaned into the loft's edge. "You taught me to shoot rats in a cellar, Boone. I figured the only difference was the hat size." He laughed. "The others didn't. Not anymore. You've got one chance," he called. "Give me the book and the old man walks." Callie looked down at Silas. He didn't blink. "He's not getting the book." She stood, slowly, revolvers at her sides. Boone raised his gun, but didn't fire. "I don't need your mercy," she said. "Not now. Not ever." Then she stepped back into shadow, and Silas raised the rifle. The trap on the south side triggered first. Two of Boone's men went down screaming, caught in a shallow pit lined with barbed wire and broken tools. Boone turned his horse and barked orders, but Silas had already moved to the barn side window, cutting down another rider with a cold, practiced shot. Then the barn caught fire. It wasn't from their doing. One of the outlaws had flanked wide, lobbed a lantern soaked in kerosene. The dry wood lit fast. Callie dropped from the loft with a hard grunt, landing near Silas as smoke curled through the rafters. "We lose the barn. We lose cover," she shouted. Silas kicked open the side door. "Then we make our last stand in the dirt." Flames licked at the hay bales. The horses screamed in panic. Boone's men, thinking the fire was a signal, surged forward. Silas grabbed Callie's arm. "Stay low, stay fast." They ran through the blaze, out into the open. Gunfire tore across the field. Callie rolled behind the old well, picked off two riders in quick succession. Silas knelt near the paddock fence, reloading on instinct. The old man moved like someone who tried to forget this life, only to find it remembered him all too well. Then Boone came. He rode straight into the clearing, dismounting mid-gallop. A shot from his silver revolver took out the gate hinge. Another slammed into the well's edge, inches from Callie's head. She fired back. Missed. Silas dropped the rifle, drew his sidearm. Boone was quick. Silas was quicker. They met near the fence line. Two shapes etched in smoke and grit. Boone fired, grazed Silas a shoulder. Silas returned with a shot that split Boone's hat clean off. But Boone didn't flinch. He kept walking. "You always were slow to die, Coil," Boone spat. "You always were fast to talk," Silas replied. Then Callie stepped between them, gun raised. Her voice shook, but her aim didn't. "It ends here," she said. Boone stared at her. "You think you're the one to stop me?" She didn't speak, just fired. The bullet struck his thigh. He dropped to one knee, snarling. Silas lunged forward, kicked the revolver from Boone's hand. The other outlaws froze. Some fled. Others stared, stunned, at the sight of Boone Raker bleeding in the dirt. Silas stood over him. "You're done." Boone looked up at Callie. "He'll leave you, just like I did." Callie shook her head. "No, he saved me." Boone tried to rise. Callie hit him across the face with the butt of her revolver. Silence followed, pure and deep. Then the barn collapsed in a roar of sparks. The last of the fireline fell. The night returned, quieter than it had been in years. By morning, the fire was little more than a black scar curling through the barn's remains. Smoke still clung to the air like old ghosts. The horses that had survived were scattered, some spooked into the scrublands, others trembling in the pasture. Silas moved slowly through the ruins, his shoulder stiff and wrapped with a torn piece of his undershirt, now stained dark with blood. He coughed once and winced. Callie sat on the steps of the cabin, the revolver resting across her lap like a sleeping dog. Her clothes were streaked with ash. Her eyes, rimmed red from smoke and lack of sleep, followed him but didn't speak. Not yet. Boone Raker lay bound in the lean-to, unconscious, a split lip and a shattered ego marking what was left of him. The others had scattered by midnight. Silas hadn't given chase. There was nothing left to chase. Not really. They'd won. But the silence of victory was heavy. Callie finally spoke. "I buried that book thinking it would be my way out." Silas stopped moving, just for a breath. "I thought if I had it, I could trade it to the marshals. Start over. Get far away. Change my name." But when Boone showed up, it wasn't about escape anymore. It was about facing him. Facing what I came from. Silas took a seat beside her, wincing as he lowered himself. "You did more than face him." "He didn't even blink when he saw me," she said quietly, like I was still just a shadow. "You're not." "No," she said. "I'm not." He looked at her then. The soot-streaked face, the calloused fingers, the scar still red and angry at the nape of her neck. She was no girl anymore. She hadn't been in a long time. "I never told you my real name," she said. Silas waited. I made up Callie. Something soft. Something forgettable. But I was born as Lillian Rose Raker. He raised an eyebrow. Doesn't sound like a name from a wanted poster. No, she said with a faint smirk. My mother gave it to me before Boone took everything. Lillian. She used to call me Lily when no one was around. Said it meant I'd grow in the worst of places. Silas nodded slowly. Seemed she was right. Lillian looked out across the plain, where smoke still rose in thin tendrils. I don't want to be a raker anymore. You don't have to be. She turned to him. Then what am I? He leaned back, the wooden step creaking beneath him. You're the girl who shot her own blood to stop a storm from swallowing this land. You're the one who came starving and scared, but didn't stay that way. You've got a scar, sure, but so do I. So does anyone who's lasted this long out here. Lillian blinked hard. You gave me your soup, she said. Your blanket. He smiled, tired but true. And my name. She looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. You mean that? I don't give things lightly. They sat in silence for a while after that, watching the prairie breathe under a rising sun. Later, they took down what was left of the barn. The land would heal, same as people did, slowly, unevenly, but without asking permission. Lillian helped with everything, even when Silas tried to tell her not to. She worked until her hands blistered, then wrapped them and worked some more. In town, word spread fast. The Rakers had fallen. Boone was chained up and sent north with a federal escort, his silver revolver locked in a case no marshal dared open. The sheriff offered Silas a badge again. He turned it down without a word. When the townsfolk asked who the girl was, Silas would glance toward the porch, where Lillian leaned against the rail in worn trousers and a sun-bleached shirt, sharpening a knife or whittling something out of pine. She's family, he'd say, and no one questioned it. 1 week later, just as the cicadas began to stir for the season, Lillian placed a single stone at the edge of the burned barn. It wasn't much, a flat gray slate with a carved lily drawn into it. No name, no date, just memory. She stood back, looked over the ranch, then to Silas. I think I'm ready to build something new. He handed her a hammer. Let's start with a roof. As the first boards went up, the wind shifted. Not the dry, moaning kind of the past, but a breeze, cool, clean, full of promise. And as the sun climbed, casting light across the blackened dirt, the girl once known as Callie began again, this time with her true name.